Sometimes in life you get challenged by people who try to lock you in a box without questioning your true motives in any way. And most people don't truly know how to defend against that. In this video we are going to analyze a clip from the actor Matt Damon and discover how he controls the frame against a journalist who tried to frame him in ways he did not appreciate.
In acting, there isn't job security, right? There's an incentive to work hard and be a better actor because you want to have a job. So why isn't it like that for teachers?
Do you think job insecurity is what makes me work hard?
Well, you have an incentive to work harder, but if there's
I
job
want to
security...
be an actor. It's not an incentive. That's the thing. So you take this MBA style thinking, right? It's the problem with ed policy right now. There's this intrinsically paternalistic view of problems that are much more complex than that. It's like saying a teacher is going to get lazy when they have tenure. A teacher wants to teach. I mean, why else would you take a shitty salary and really long hours and do that job unless you really love to do it?
So we are going to use the magical linguistics model to figure out what is happening here from a rhetorical standpoint and how anyone can control the frame in any sort of discussion without getting aggressive at all. The first thing we can notice is that she is making an inference about if teachers had less security job like actors, they would work harder and be much more productive, or they would work better, etc. That is the premise and the conclusion, what her mind has formed as a belief at this point. Immediately, like any competent communicator, he is challenging that inference instead of accepting it as being true. Linguistically, we normally challenge a belief like this or an inference by asking, how can this mean that? How can people having less security in their job mean that they would work harder? Here he's challenging by making an analogy directly with himself, because obviously he is an actor, and he says, you think this is what makes me work hard? And she responds by giving another inference from her model of the world, clarifying that, well, when you might lose your job like actors do much more, then you work harder, you are pushed to work much more. And he continues by following up on his own frame, well, no, in my worldview, what happened in my life, which is not yours, it is mine, so I kind of know better what happens in my life than you do. In my life, I have always wanted to be an actor, so your claim does not make any sense in that conversation. Commenting on your own intention or your own backstory is probably the best analogy you can ever use to convince somebody about something, about anything, because when they are not you, which is always the case, I hope, then they can't refute what happened in your life, unless you are widely known as being a liar. Otherwise, people can't really refute what happened in your life. So using yourself as a counter evidence, or your backstory or your past as a counter evidence, often works more than by trying to give counter examples about other people that you don't even know about. And he concludes with another analogy: a teacher does not get lazy just because they get tenure. So that is the final conclusion to his statement, but that argument alone would have been dismissed much more easily if he had used it without clarifying his own story and how he is a perfect counter evidence to what she's saying so far. What is really interesting when you start uncovering communication tactics is that the same kind of structures keep coming back all the time. When somebody successfully outframes an opponent or somebody they argue with, the same kind of linguistic loops keep coming back again and again. If you want to find the best ones before continuing with this video, you can find down below an assembly of the 7 best patterns or strategies you may ever use whenever you are trying to confront somebody and you don't really know how to do that, or that person has had an edge over you so far. This small PDF is giving you all the best clues I could give you to defend yourself against somebody who might be stupid or trying to push your hot buttons on purpose.
A teacher wants to teach. I mean, why else would you take a shitty salary and really long hours and do that job unless you really love to do it? What's your incentive? By your way of thinking, I don't understand. Why does anybody teach? What's your incentive?
Well, if you have job security, don't you you feel like that disincentivizes an
It's not
individual?
job security. You just heard. Did you hear what she said? It's
Aren't there 10% that are bad though? 10% of teachers are bad.
Where'd you get that number?
I don't know. 10% of people in any profession maybe should think of something else. Right?
Well, okay, but I mean, maybe you're a shitty cameraman. I don't know. Maybe 10% of cameramen are bad. I mean, but what's the point? What's the point?
Yeah, what
Well, then how do they get fired? It's impossible to fire someone who has tenure.
I just told you that's not true. Did you listen?
Come on, it's very difficult. Almost
How do you know that? Where are you getting that? I've been a lifelong educator, so where are you getting that information?
I mean, this is
You came with that information and
Yeah.
you're sticking with it. But listen, there's an answer from an expert who said that's not true, and you're not absorbing that information.
Now you're full of shit. Sit down.
Continuing with the conversation, Matt Damon is commenting on the intention, on the presumed intention of all the teachers out there, because she has been making so far a generalization about all teachers. Therefore, he is responding with the same generalization, including the intention, the presumed intention of all the teachers out there. By your way of thinking, why does anybody teach in the end? Because you are obviously reducing every possible desire to teach to only what fits your narrative. To this, the camera dude interjects with, well, 10% of teachers are bad and should change their job, so we have a counter argument. And that is what I was explaining earlier. Those are the weakest possible arguments when you just try to point out to a minority. On top of that, a minority of people you don't even know, because he did not mention anyone specifically. He said 10%. First of all, we don't know where that number comes from, and he did not even point out to anybody he personally knew. Maybe he does, but he did not even point out to anybody like this. So the way Matt Damon is going to respond to that is particularly interesting, because when you want to play at controlling the frame, you really need to target, or should I say, match the level of cognitive thinking of the person you are arguing with. As Shannon Adler famously wrote, arguing with a fool is like playing chess with a pigeon. No matter how good you are, the pigeon is just going to knock over all the pieces, shit on the board, and strut proudly like it won anyway. So the way Matt is responding is by using an analogy with, well, you want to play a 10% bullshit thing? I can say the same thing. 10% of cameramen may be complete shit, maybe you are part of them. How does that make the argument move forward? Please tell me. In a less polite way, that might mean if it is only to make comments of that level, why do you even open your mouth? Maybe it is just to get a reaction, which is what journalists do a lot with movie stars, and to confront that it is easier to match the level of their thinking rather than trying to educate them in a sophisticated way which they won't take into account anyway. But then to try to push the envelope a little bit more, the journalist is pointing out to a potential outcome, a resulting outcome of what might happen as a result of her initial claim. Well, it's impossible to fire teachers when they get tenure. And there, okay, that might be a more interesting argument. We might look into this. Why not? Maybe, probably she has some good points here. But the fact she has probably been operating from bad faith just to get a reaction from a movie star because it gets more views when you try to do that, to push their hot buttons, then that conversation might not even be worth it in the end. Not even in that context, that is what it is, it happened long ago. But if you are stuck in a conversation and the person just keep trying to push your hot buttons to get a reaction, at some point, why do you keep arguing with them also? That is something to keep into consideration. And that is leading to what he did at the end, because he led with a meta frame commenting on the situation and commenting on the overall aspect of her behavior so far, rather than only reacting passively to the specific arguments they said, like the 10% bullshit thing. He said, considering his mom, who is there with him, is a teacher and she is bringing some nuance because she said, no, it is not true, at least not as true as you make it appear when you say it like this. And he said, there was right there an answer from an expert, somebody who is more involved in teaching than me or yourself are, and she said it was not true, and you're not absorbing that information in the end. So the meta frame in this model is often about this, commenting on their behavior, on their ways to communicate, instead of reacting like a victim to their way of communicating. Commenting on how they said it or how they communicate instead of reacting to it. Here, you seem to not absorb information. Like, is it a condition that you have? Is there something blocking your neurons from grasping the content of the words we are pronouncing right now? What is it about? But again, she might as well be operating from bad faith anyway, just to get a reaction from him. I don't know, I wasn't there. That is just a possibility of what she might be trying to do here. And in any case, I would say he handled that pretty properly. I would say, if you disagree, please tell me why you disagree in the comments. That might be an interesting conversation to hear from you too. As a reminder, if you want to figure out more of those tactics and how can you apply them yourself in your own life, in any kind of conversation that pisses you off the most, you can download the document down below called The 7 Steps to Master Sleight of Mouth, which was the origin of magical linguistics, the model I developed. It was based on sleight of mouth, and you can find all the tricks and all the subtleties about how to use that into all of your conversations. And with that in mind, thanks a lot for watching. I will see you soon in the next video. Keep looking.